So the story is set in a remote village in Pennsylvania, seemingly in the 19th century surrounded by dense woods. It begins with a funeral for the son of August Nicholson, who is one of the village elders. After the burial, the villagers gather for a meal, and the chief elder, Edward Walker, offers some comforting words to everyone. During the meal, strange noises come from the forest, and Noah Percy, a man with a developmental disability, starts laughing and clapping excitedly. Next, we see a montage of the village's daily life. The villagers live in harmony, working together. As part of their routine, they bury anything red, and every night, someone climbs a watchtower to keep an eye on the woods. So we also catch a glimpse of a mysterious hooded figure dressed in red, reflected in the water. One morning, Edward is heading to the school, where he works as a teacher, only to find the children gathered in a circle, staring at a dead animal. The body is bloody and missing its fur. The children claim they didn't put it there. Edward brings everyone inside and asks his students who have done such a horrible thing. The children suggest it was those we don't speak of, meat-eating monsters living in the woods. Edward reminds them that there's a truce with the creatures. As long as the villagers don't enter their forest, the monsters won't come into the village. Later that day, the village elders hold a meeting to discuss upcoming celebrations. During the meeting, Lucius Hunt, the son of Elder Alice Hunt, asks to speak. Lucius explains that the recent death of the child has been weighing on him, and he wants permission to cross the forest to visit other towns and get new medicines. A squam. He believes the monsters won't harm him because they can sense emotions and his intentions are pure. However, the elders deny his request, and so that nihilist questions Lucius about his decision, but he simply says he's going to spend time with the watchtower guard, Finton Coin. And when Lucius joins Finton at the watchtower, he asks what Finton thinks of the towns outside the village. Finton responds that they are wicked places filled with wicked people. He also thanks Lucius for coming, even though Lucius wasn't supposed to be there. The next morning, another fur-less animal carcass is discovered in the village. The elders call a meeting and suggest it was likely a predator, such as a coyote or wolf suffering from madness. They dismiss the idea that it could have been those we don't speak of, because the creatures are large and would have been noticed if they had entered the village. On their way home, Edward talks with his daughter Kitty, who confesses that she's in love and wants permission to marry. Edward is displeased that the boy isn't with her to ask for her hand in marriage. Kitty explains that she hasn't spoken to the boy yet because she wanted her father's blessing first, which she then reveals the boy is Lucius. Edward gives his blessing. Kitty rushes to Lucius and confesses her love, but Lucius turns her down. Heartbroken, Kitty returns home and cries on the lap of her blind sister, Ivy, while Ivy sings to comfort her. Meanwhile, Lucius chops wood and takes it to August Nicholson's house. August wonders if his son and Lucius had grown close because neither of them talked much, but he also remarks that Lucius is kind. At the edge of the village, a group of boys is playing a game of bravery. The challenge is to stand on a stump, facing away from the forest with arms outstretched, and see how long they can last before they get scared. So the current player says he hears noises from the woods, but he stands his ground. To back at August's house, August talks to Lucius about sorrow, saying that one can run from it, but it will always find you because it can smell you like a dog. He then glances at a mysterious black box in the corner. We return to the boys, who finally flee from the area when the noises in the woods become too much for them. So the next morning, Ivy is called to deal with Noah, who is hitting other boys with a stick. Noah immediately stops when Ivy asks him to. She then takes him to look at a special house where he'll be locked in if he doesn't behave. They make a deal, and Noah promises he won't hit anyone again. With that settled, Ivy and Noah decide to spend time together by racing up a hill to a resting rock. So Noah asks her not to cheat, but she distracts him and cheats anyway. When they reach the rock, they find Lucius already there. So Lucius shares some food with them, and Ivy talks about how much her sister cried after Lucius turned her down. Ivy also tells Lucius that she can sense certain people as they give off a faint color, and her father has the same ability. Suddenly, Noah leaves to chase a bird, and Lucius tells Ivy that she runs like a boy. She thanks him for his help, and then admits that she knows why he rejected her sister, because Lucius actually likes her. She figured this out because he stopped touching her years ago. Just then, Noah comes back and plays a prank on Ivy by putting a small toad on her hand. Afterward, he pulls out some red berries from her pocket and puts them in her hand too. He smiles, enjoying the gift, until Lucius notices and points out that the berries are the bad color, which attracts the creatures they fear. If Ivy agrees they should bury the berries, but now Lucius is concerned because he's never seen those berries before, and Noah already had them before they arrived. Lucius asks Noah where he found them, and Noah leads him to the spot. Later that day, Lucius reads a letter to the village elders telling them about the berries Noah found near a drawing on the resting rock. So this makes Lucius realize that Noah has been going into the forest all along without any harm coming to him. So Lucius believes this proves the creatures won't hurt him either, and he once again asks the elders for permission to go to other towns. That night, back at their house, Alice shares a story with Lucius about the other towns. She tells him about his father, who went to the market and was later found naked and robbed by a river. She wants Lucius to understand the danger of what he's asking for, but Lucius explains that he's not doing it for himself, it's for the village. He adds that he's not the one keeping secrets because the village is full of them. So he points out the black box Alice keeps, saying it's part of the secrets. Alice explains that the box is for her own protection, a way to remember the evil things from her past without being harmed by them. So Lucius wants to open the box, but Alice refuses and suggests they speak to Edward instead. Lucius then says that Edward has feelings for Alice, as shown by the fact that he never touches her. The next day, a group of boys, including Lucius, dressed in yellow cloaks, walk along the border between the village and the forest, painting a yellow line on the torch posts that separate the two areas. When they finish, everyone returns to the village except Lucius. He stays behind and enters the woods. It doesn't take long for him to find more berries. He hears growling and looks to his side, spotting a creature running away. He decides to return to the village after that. It's nighttime when he arrives and finds Ivy outside her house. She tells him she heard from her parents that Lucius wants to leave the village to get medicine. Ivy thinks it's a noble idea but warns him that it's dangerous. She also shares that her older sister is getting married, which means Ivy is now free to be courted by others. Later, we cut to the watchtower. Finton hears a noise and opens the hatch, thinking it's Lucius, but it turns out to be one of the creatures. After hesitating, he rings the bell to alert the village. Panic spreads, and everyone rushes to hide in their homes, so Lucius helps villagers to safety while Kitty takes Noah, the kids, and Ivy into the basement. Ivy stays at the door, waiting for Lucius. She holds out her hand, and a creature approaches, about to touch her, but Lucius arrives just in time. He grabs her hand and pulls her inside to hide with the others in the basement. The next morning, the villagers discover red markings on the doors of every house. The elders hold a meeting to figure out what's going on. The markings seem like a warning, but the creatures have never attacked without reason before. So when the elders ask if anyone knows anything, they receive a written note from Lucius. In it, he admits that he went into the woods and was seen by the creatures. Edward goes to Lucius, who is crying, and tells him that he's been brave. A few days later, the villagers celebrate Kitty's wedding. The party is lively with food, decorations, and dancing. There's also a ritual where two men in yellow cloaks leave meat on a rock for the creatures. Alice congratulates Edward on his daughter's marriage and offers him her hand to shake, but he doesn't take it, confirming Lucius' suspicion about Edward's feelings. The festivities are cut short when children's screams are heard. The kids are brought to Edward, and they explain that they saw the creatures in the village, leaving more warnings. They fear the creatures want them to leave. Edward cancels the party and sends everyone home for protection. So when they return to the village, they're horrified to find dead animals everywhere. Livestock has been skinned, and the hides and feathers are missing. There are strange marks on the barn doors, so high up that no ordinary animal could have made them. The elders are confused and worried. Meanwhile, Ivy wakes up in the middle of the night and steps outside to find Lucius sitting on her porch. She sits next to him, and they talk. Ivy tells Lucius that there will be an inquiry the next day to figure out how the village's border was breached. So Lucius tells Ivy to go inside because it's cold and dangerous outside, but she changes the subject. First, she asks if Lucius thinks she's a tomboy, then brings up the game of bravery, where Lucius holds the record. She wonders how he can be so brave, and he replies that he focuses on what needs to be done. Ivy then asks if he will dance with her on their wedding night and questions why he hears his thoughts more openly. So Lucius, feeling a little frustrated, says that if he wanted to talk or dance with her, he would ask. Most importantly, he admits that he does get scared, especially when he thinks of something bad happening to Ivy, which is why he's on the porch is worried for her safety above all else. In the end, Lucius agrees to dance with her on their wedding night. The next day, during a village meeting, someone asks Alice if the rumors about Ivy and Lucius are true. Alice confirms them. Meanwhile, Ivy is talking to her sister, Kitty, asking for a blessing because she doesn't want to hurt her sister, who she says is more important than any boy. Kitty gives her blessing and wishes them happiness. While the sisters talk, Noah, who is clearly upset by the news, visits Lucius. So Lucius knows Noah has feelings for Ivy, but before he can say much, Noah stabs him twice. And next, we see the Purses preparing for a village meeting when Noah arrives at their house, covered in blood, and calls it the bad color. So the elders are quickly informed of the accident, and the villagers begin searching for the injured person. As soon as Ivy hears that Noah is involved, she guesses that Lucius might be hurt and rushes to his house. She finds Lucius unconscious on the floor, kneels beside him, and hugs him. When her father, Edward, arrives, Ivy tells him she can't see Lucius' color, indicating how serious his condition is. So later, one of the elders tells the villagers that Lucius is barely hanging on and could die at any moment, urging everyone to pray for him. Ivy visits Noah, who is locked away, and slaps him repeatedly until Noah's father has to drag her out. So Noah is heard crying and throwing things after being left alone. Later, Ivy speaks to her father, telling him that if Lucius dies, she will too. She asks for permission to leave the village and go to the towns to get medicine. Edward, in turn, talks to the village doctor to learn more about Lucius' condition. The doctor says Lucius has an infection, and all they can do is pray. Edward presses the doctor for more options, and the doctor admits that Lucius would have a better chance if they had access to proper resources to stop the infection. Alice pulls Edward aside and reminds him of the oath he swore as one of the elders, which prevents them from going to the towns for help. help. She starts crying, but Edward hugs her and doesn't listen. Edward then takes Ivy for a walk and tells her a story about her grandfather who was killed because of greed over money. He explains that this is why their village avoids the use of money. It turns people cruel. He then leads Ivy to an old shed that is forbidden to use and warns her not to scream as he shows her what's inside. In the next scene, Ivy is packing a bag to leave the village and get medicine for Lucius. And meanwhile, Edward gathers the other elders to inform them about what's happening. Ivy is later seen standing near the village borders wearing a yellow cloak. Two villagers, Fintan and Kristoff, join her, also wearing yellow cloaks. As they approach the woods, Ivy holds up a small bag, signaling her readiness. However, they barely make it into the woods when Kristoff refuses to continue. Ivy reassures him that they have magic rocks for protection, but Kristoff is skeptical, wondering why they've never heard of these rocks before. Despite Fintan's pleas, Kristoff turns back and leaves. After a while, it starts raining, and Fintan hears something in the trees. Getting scared, Hull too decides to return to the village, leaving Ivy all alone. Distraught, Ivy drops the magic rocks. At this moment, there's a flashback to what Edward showed her in the shed. The monsters she feared were actually just costumes. Edward reveals that it was all a lie. The elders created stories of creatures in the woods to scare people away and keep them inside the village. All the strange happenings, like the screaming in the woods and animal bodies, were staged by the elders to maintain control. So Edward explains that this lie was not meant to hurt anyone, but Lucius' situation has forced him to make an exception. She gives Ivy a pocket watch and a list of medicines to retrieve, instructing her on how to navigate the woods and find the towns. However, he warns her not to tell anyone outside their village about where she came from. Edward visits Alice to inform her that he sent Ivy to the towns, saying it's the only thing he can do for her. We then see Edward meeting with the village elders, who are unhappy with his choice. They accuse him of risking everything they've built. However, Edward defends his decision, reminding them that the village was created to provide hope, so he can't bear to see another elder lose a child. He also points out that they won't live forever, and Ivy and Lucius are the right people to take over one day. Eventually, August relents and tells the others to allow Ivy to leave. Back in the present, Ivy continues her journey through the forest. Since she can't see the ground, she accidentally falls into a hole, but slams herself by grabbing onto a branch. She carefully climbs out and rests for a moment by a fallen tree. As she resumes walking, she suddenly hears strange noises. Throwing a branch in that direction only makes the sounds louder, so she starts running until she finds herself in a field of red berries. A growling sound makes her turn around to see one of the creatures right behind her. She tells herself it's not real, but when the creature starts chasing her, she runs again. Eventually, she stumbles across the fallen tree from earlier, which gives her an idea. She stands still, arms outstretched, mimicking the game the village boys used to play on the stump. When the creature is close enough, Ivy steps aside, causing it to fall into the hole. Meanwhile, back in the village, the Percys visit Noah, but discover he isn't at home. Instead, they find an empty hole in the floor, which reveals that Noah found the hidden creature costume and ran with it. We then cut back to the hole in the woods, where the creature's mask has come loose, revealing that Noah was the one who chased Ivy. He dies in the hole. Ivy continues walking and eventually finds a road. Leaving her cloak and bag behind, she follows the road and soon reaches a tall wall, which she climbs to cape the forest. Back in the village, the elders begin opening their black boxes, reflecting on their past lives and why they created the village. They were all victims of violence in the city and met at a grief counseling clinic. Edward convinced them to form a new community where they would be safe from the dangers of the outside world. To group photo, Edward looks at reveals something shocking. The village isn't from the 19th century, but from the 21st. So on the other side of the wall, Ivy lands just as a jeep with a Walker Wildlife Preserve logo pulls up. A park ranger named Kevin gets out, believing Ivy is an intruder. He tells her she shouldn't be there. Ivy explains that she came from the woods and needs help, handing him a list of medicines and her pocket watch as payment. So realizing someone is hurt, Kevin agrees to help, as the medicine she needs is available in the guard shacks. Ivy is taken aback by Kevin's kindness, not expecting such behavior from people outside her village. Kevin drives to the guard shack, where his boss reminds him that their job is simple: keep people away from the sanctuary and leave the woods undisturbed. He advises Kevin not to talk to any intruders. His boss also recalls when they paid airplanes not to fly over the area, which had caused him stress. While the boss goes back to reading the newspaper, Kevin secretly takes the medicine and a maintenance ladder. Ivy, now wearing her yellow cloak, makes her way back to the village. Kevin, on the other side of the wall, has the ladder she used and hangs her pocket watch on his rearview mirror. Shortly after, news of Ivy's return with the medicine reaches the elders, who are waiting by Lucius's bedside. They also hear that Ivy was attacked by a creature but killed it, upsetting Noah's parents. Edward tells them they'll find Noah and give him a proper burial, but they will tell the village that a creature was responsible for his death. Noah's actions have made the stories of the creatures real, giving the village a chance to continue, if that's what Sorsway elders want. They all agree. The movie ends with Ivy entering the room and taking Lucius's hand, telling him she's back. Subscribe for popcorn. We are racing towards 500 subscribers.